Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's museum's ArtBreak series, an artist talk with Carl Austin Hyatt. I'm Sarah Claflin, Education and Communications Manager for the museum and the moderator for this session today. Today's talk will be recorded and available later on our YouTube channel. The session will last about 50 minutes. I'll begin with a brief introduction and then hand it over to Carl for a 20-minute talk followed by Q&A. Please feel free to use the chat feature throughout this talk for questions and comments. I would like to thank the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for their partnership and support of our current exhibition Impact, which is on view until May 20th. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Portsmouth photographer and award winner of the 2020 Piscataqua Regional Artist Advancement Grant from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. Carl is known for his large format gelatin silver and platinum prints of landscapes and portraits. Over 35 years ago, photographing the rocky coastline of New Hampshire is what drew Hyatt to the area. His extensive travel to Peru and South Africa taught him about the sacred quality of stone while studying with indigenous cultures, in particular shamans who work to tap the healing and spiritual qualities of stones. Today, Carl will tell us more about his studio practice, his experiences that led him to fine art photography, and how this award is moving his practice forward. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Carl and hand it over to him.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Yes, and I also would certainly like to thank the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and the museum at the University of New Hampshire, and Sarah and all your people out there who have been so supportive of making this happen. My first time making a presentation on Zoom, so please bear with me. Most of my comments will be directed at the students there, but hopefully what I have to say, people will find some relevance in for, wherever they're coming from. We're going to start with a little video that a friend of mine did that lays out quite a lot of the broad themes of my life, my interests, my passions. And since I get to talk about my passions today, it's going to be all about that. But again, I hope that it is relevant for you. I have to do a quick shout out to my daughter from Canada who's checking in. Hi, Alice. Okay, and also, this is not a very structured talk. It's going to be very improvisational. We will have some pictures. So questions and in the chat room and everything are very much encouraged. So I'd much rather be responding to you and taking the conversation in the direction that you would like. Yeah, so without further ado, let's do the video and then we'll jump back in.
As a child, I always felt that nature was conscious, alive. It wasn't just stuff. Nature and physicality is delicious and responsive and playful. It's a very pure love. Of course, in our Western culture, we're taught that it's basically inert, inorganic stuff. There's nobody home. But nature is not stuff. It's alive, it's conscious, it's aware in its way. It's not quoting Shakespeare to you, but maybe something even more profound. That's one of the reasons that I went to Peru to work with indigenous shamans, because the shamans all over the world view nature as conscious and alive. It's only in the last 300 or 400 years that we have decided, quite in opposition to the previous 100,000 years of human history, that the earth is just dead matter. And one of the profound aspects of that is when you decide that nature is dead, then you are profoundly alone in the universe. And for the human psyche, that's a tragedy. Whenever you're in the real presence of something and you know that you're present and it's present, that's incredibly exciting because we don't live in that space a lot. And we love it when we do. Everybody wakes up. Even in a industrial salt pile, it can be profoundly moving when you look closely. when you care about it. It's a work of art. And so to pick up my camera and go out to photograph is so exciting. I don't know what I'm going to see. That's why I'm going. Oh, look at this.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So that touches on the broad themes of my life and my work. I first moved here in the middle 1980s, and I was visiting, and I stayed because of the Rocky Coast. Particularly back in the mid 80s, the Rocky Coast out here of New Hampshire was kind of deserted. It's gotten quite popular now, but back then I had absolute access just by pulling the car off to the side of the road. And as you saw in the video, I work with a large camera, so having nature easily accessible to me was crucial, so that I could respond quickly. And, as you know, with photography, you've got to be there. So over the years, I started to develop a relationship with this 2 miles of shoreline, basically from Wallace Sands up to Odiorn Point, a couple of miles of rocks and the ocean. And so this became, I was looking for a place very much like Thoreau's Walden. I was very inspired by Thoreau when I was in college. I wanted to be a writer, but photography came much more easily than writing. When I got out of college, I was kicking around, and my father, who was a, East Coast businessman, he had been a photographer in the Second World War. So he knew about photography, and he could tell that I was kind of lost, and he signed me up in an Ansel Adams photography workshop. I went out to that workshop. We can show that image of Ansel. So by the time I got out there, it was a workshop on making a photographic book, and I barely knew how to take a photograph, never mind make a book. So when they came in, it was a 2-week workshop. When they came in, they asked for a volunteer to volunteer in the darkroom to process the film and make the position prints for making this mock-up of a book. So my hand went up right away. And so I spent the 2 weeks with Ansel's assistant in Ansel's darkroom, just making these prints and doing the grunt work of processing film and stuff like that. But the unusual benefit that came out of that was that at the end of the day, Ansel would come in and say, well, guys, you've worked very hard all day. Come on over to the house for drinks. So I was 20, 21. Photography was not that important to the world, fine art photography in 1970, 71. It was only just starting. And Ansel was a big part, of course, of getting that started, getting photography recognized as a fine art form. And he had just hired a business manager because he felt that his career was, and his legacy was not where it could be. But I was not overly impressed with Ansel. He wasn't the great Ansel Adams in my eyes. He was just this wonderful photographer. And, but what I learned from Ansel was not technique, but how to be an artist, how to be with your medium. These were adults. I came from a middle-class family. Everybody did business, basically. I was certainly aware of art, but to actually see Ansel and these other photographers and book publishers that he brought to the workshops was changed my life. To just see that you could do that with your life. And his particular masculine presence was more than anything he ever said. Just his presence was a teaching for me and just woke something up in me. And I'm not the biggest fan of Ansel's photography either. I do work in his tradition of a large format and film. I still shoot film and make silver and platinum prints. I was much more inspired by Edward Weston, Paul Strand, people like that. So anyway, as I was driving back across the country, I literally had an epiphany on the side of the road one day where I could feel the aliveness of nature. I had felt that before, but I had never felt it so overwhelmingly. And at the very same time, a recognition that I was a photographer and that I could see. And from that moment on, I have been working. As everybody in my family, including my wife and my daughter, knows, I work. This is what I do. To me, it feels like a mission. And there's a great purpose that I don't even understand behind it. So the two things of the aliveness of nature, that palpable feeling that there's a presence out there and awareness, and this beautiful medium of photography sort of came together in that. I think we all choose our mediums, obviously, depending on where your heart goes. And when I looked at, so for me, I'm not a big fan of showing my work in a digital format, because for me, it's actually the physicality of the print. That's what excited me. The prints of Edward Weston, the prints of Paul Strand, the sculpture of Noguchi, all of these things, or just like the presence of Ansel or the presence of my wife or my children, it's their presence that excites me, not some digital knockoff. So it's very visceral for me, very physical. And so I try to make the most beautiful prints I can make, and I like them to be seen in the original. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. Let's do the next slide, Sarah. These are the Portsmouth Harbor salt piles. This is one of my cameras, an 11x14 view camera. It takes 11x14 inch film. In a minute, I'll show you some film here. And I started photographing there in the late 80s. And again, it's not an environmental statement. It's an aesthetic statement. Yeah, we could go through those, Sarah, the salt pile pictures here, a few of the images from the salt piles. It's actually quite a large body of work and is pretty much ongoing. Yeah, we can go through those. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And this is a little bit for the photography students in the darkroom. This is printing platinum. Platinum paper is very slow and is exposed by contact printing and is sensitive to blue light. So this is an ultraviolet light that exposes it, the negative, it's a contact printing process. Okay, Sarah? Processing in the trays, 11x14 contact print. And go ahead, Sarah. And that's the platinum print. Again, in digital, you know, you can't appreciate the unique qualities, the sensuous qualities of a platinum print in a snapshot like this. Okay, Sarah, next. So as I was photographing out on the coast for the next 15 years, I began to have more and more experiences of the aliveness of nature, of the responsiveness of the world. Clouds would seem to come in at just the right moment. Certain stones particularly would seem to call to me. They didn't seem to call to me, you know, they called to me. In Peru, we call that, when you find a stone that's calling to you, and you know it, you know, you're walking along the beach, there's a billion stones, and you see one, you go, oh, look at this. We call that the stone is flirting with you. In the indigenous world, nature has agency. It has its own purpose, its own intent. You know, it's been going on for billions of years before we showed up. So there's a lot going on in nature that we are completely clueless about. But we are part of nature, and nature is constantly speaking to us. But in our Western culture, we have been told, literally and often, and with a kind of punitive edge to it, that it's dead matter. You may have a nice romantic relationship with your oak tree in the backyard, but you know, really, come on, seriously, it's an oak tree. What can you learn from an oak tree? Okay, next, Sarah. So stones just had this overwhelming call to me. And even I found this just sort of very perplexing, very emotional, very mysterious, but again, powerful. I couldn't ignore it. And so this became part of my reading, and I read about shamanic cultures, but they seemed so far away. I read about Noguchi and Brancusi and Michelangelo. These are people who loved stone and viscerally felt, I'm sure, the same thing I felt about stones. But again, I didn't know where to take it other than to photograph it. Next, Sarah. So these are a couple of early photographs. Next one, Sarah. Which I thought were pretty successful, but it was very hard for me. And again, part of that was just being a young, ambitious man in my 40s and trying to make a name for myself and trying to make it happen. So I really needed to develop much more my feminine side of being able to dance with this much more rather than make it happen. Next, Sarah. Yeah, and just being out there, being in the presence of nature, participating with nature, that's when things start to happen, not when you're thinking about it. As everybody who's an artist, I'm sure knows. Go ahead, Sarah. Next. Yeah, so, and I'm just constantly on the shore, even today. So then a very unusual thing happened in 1997. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the spirit of the nature of that coast decided that I had put in a long enough apprenticeship and that they were going to actually send me somewhere where people knew about stones. So I ran into a lady on the streets of Portsmouth one afternoon, and she was showing some snapshots. We didn't have digital cameras back then. And she had just gotten back from Peru and was very excited, and that she was showing these pictures of indigenous people in ponchos, men and women up in the mountains of the Andes. And I said, so these are shamans, right? And she said, yes, I just got back and we got initiated at 15,000 feet and they work with stones. So I immediately started working with her teacher in the States, and 6 months later, I went on my first trip to Peru, and particularly to this one little tribe that was only discovered in 1949. They live in little villages up at 13 to 16,000 feet. And this picture was taken in 1998 on the very first day where we are meeting. And I'm about to learn from these wise men. Literally, it was going to meet the wise man on the mountain. The fellow on the right will become more important as the slides go on. He's our young translator. His name is Puma. He was 18 at the time. He's 40 now. And so at the age of about 49, my life took a sharp left turn. And it was just the fates graced me with this opportunity, with this opening. I thought that it would be a one-off trip to Peru, just to touch the land where these teachings were coming from. but I fell madly in love. And I've been back more than 35 times since then. Okay, Sarah, next. So quickly, this is some of that landscape up at 13, 14, 15,000 feet. They were very isolated, and so their traditions go back to the pre-Incas. Their traditions are thousands of years old. And what I was looking for, whether I could articulate it or not at the time, was to meet people and to know people and to get out of my Western culture. My Western culture, which by this time I felt was seriously missing the boat about what was true and valuable in the world. And these people knew how to connect to the spirit of nature, and specifically the spirit of stones. In the jungle, of course, the shamans connect with plants. All shamanic cultures or indigenous cultures, they connect with the land that they're in. That's how they glean their wisdom directly. They don't Google. They talk to the stars, they talk to the stones, they talk to the land, and the land talks back. This is very hard for us to get, even hard for me to get when I was down there at first, because we are enculturated. Our culture programs us consciously and unconsciously. This is one of my strongest points I want to make today. We are caught in a culture. Yes, it supports us. Yes, it brings us many benefits, but like a fish in water, we cannot see what it's doing to us unless we step outside of it. Either stepping outside of it or listening deeply inside yourself to your own truth and trusting that. That's my other point. I could end the conversation here. Trust yourself. Our culture is a very young and ignorant culture in many ways. And, you know, all we have to do is look around to see what this culture has done to the planet. Every culture sets a context. And in order to get along in that culture, you have to adapt to that context. And there are many great benefits to that. But the shadow downside of Western culture is that it extracts, it suppresses our natural connection to the natural world. And if you do have that connection, it trivializes it. It's just romantic. Yeah, I'll have more to say about that. Okay, next, Sarah. So these are the people of the high mountains there, of the Keto. We could go through this. They live, when I first got there, and very much now, it's the 15th century. So life is tough. Life is difficult, but they know how to do it. We stay there for a sec, Sarah. So this gentleman, I photographed back in 2010. He was one of the highest ranking shamans there. And can we go back one, Sarah? So this was her husband, this grandmother. And this is her son, who is also a shaman. And so I was visiting at exactly this time last year. I just got out of Peru in time to catch one of the last flights before COVID came. And he passed away 2 years ago. Okay, Sarah, we go ahead. Donna Andreas Flores, powerful man. Okay, next. Again, the village is up there. Dirt floors, thatch roof, stone, llamas and potatoes. Next. Okay, so this is Puma, the young man who was the translator. Puma was struck by lightning when he was 6 years old, which is a classic shamanic initiation that the spirits want you. And so Puma, when I saw him sitting there next to those three old gentlemen, I thought, well, those guys are the tradition and he's the future. And Puma and I have become lifelong friends. And this is his grandfather, who is a shaman, passed away in 2008. He thought that he would never pass along his knowledge because his sons, who were basically my age, all wanted to go to Lima and get a real life, get a car, get a washing machine, get a job. And then when Puma came along and was struck by lightning, he thought, aha, I have my apprentice. And those two are joined on a soul level. They were a remarkable pair. Puma is now teaching internationally and in Peru. Okay, next. How are we doing on time, Sarah? Am I going on too long?
Carl, we're at like 12:30, so
okay,
maybe another 10 or 12 minutes, and then we can open it up for questions.
Great. Okay. This is Puma on the left, and his great grandmother, who was 105 at the time I took this picture. She was a herbalist and a healer. She was deaf and blind, but living alone, supported by the community or helped out by the community. She could still get around with her chickens and her potatoes. Okay, next. This is grandfather Don Maximo teaching. Just such a privilege to be in the presence of these people. They're so loving and fierce and wise. Go ahead. I never met any of my grandfathers, so Don Maximo and I ended up having a very wonderful, intimate relationship before he passed away. Okay, next. This is Don Pedro, just outside of Cusco, a wild man, complete wild man, powerful shaman. Next. And I've been photographing him over the years, and he always kept saying, "Oh, I'm gonna frame your pictures." In Cusco, when they frame something important, it's always in these wooden gold frames. That's what they put all their saints in. So he finally did it up. And last time I was there, he said, "Oh, come to the temple room, I'll show you." So there's Don Pedro with some of the photographs of him over the years. Okay. This is photographing Puma and some other shamans in the Sacred Valley down outside of Cusco. Yep. This is back up in the mountains again with that shamanist that I'm sitting next to. I could tell stories all day. Another time. There's Puma on the left. Potatoes are the thing. I think in Russia, the traditional gift to someone visiting is bread, salt, and vodka. Hot potatoes is the offering up in the mountains. Okay. Look at this stonework. This is that famous Inca stonework pre-Inca. This is way pre-Inca. Incas were like 500 years ago. This goes way back. No mortar, huge rocks. Those rocks do not move in an earthquake, and they go back like 6 or 8 feet into the wall. They're huge. How they built these walls, people just guess. Okay, next. Again, this place is called Sacsayhuaman. It doesn't get any press because Machu Picchu gets all the press. Sacsayhuaman is like 50 Stonehenges. It's huge. Same thing, no mortar. Unbelievable, 180-ton stones. Next. Next. Okay, we're coming to the end. These are some of the people I work with, and they're praying. They use coca leaves because coca leaves are very sacred to them. Chewing coca leaves is like having half a glass of wine. It just gives you a little buzz, but what it does is it's tremendously healthy for you. Gives you vitality and strength in your body and in your lungs, which at high altitudes is just crucial. So their prayers, just like in Native American up here, prayers go into tobacco, which is a sacred plant all over the world. Here, their prayers go into their coca leaves and out to the spirits. Next. Again, with coca leaves. That is a condor on his back. He's a condor shaman. Next. Praying into her medicine bundle. Next. This gentleman, after agitating for and fighting for the rights of the indigenous people, which they finally got citizenship in the late 60s, he went up to the mountains at 17,000 feet, and for the next 30 years sat in ceremony with the mountains and the weather in the mountains, so that he would ensure that the beneficent energies in the upper world would come down to the fields in his village below. So he was like a monk, and you would bring him potatoes and do ceremony with him. Passed away in 2005. Next. And young Puma again. Yeah, okay. So, yeah. So keep those cards and letters coming. Any questions? So one of the points I want to make is that, and this is where this all circles back to being an artist. Largely, we don't, I'm sure that all of you have had, you know, amazing dreams, amazing synchronicities, times where you felt that the planet was alive and conscious. But we have a reflex reaction of pushing that off and trivializing it or doubting it. And I would encourage everybody to turn up the volume on that, because that is the natural world and the wisdom of the natural world touching you. And it's uniquely for you. Now, the other thing that comes along with our Western culture is a particular perceptual state. We privilege rationality. We privilege logic. We privilege focusing here. You know, we're constantly concentrating. Whereas when you're in your dreams, here is a very small part of your awareness. We all drift into trance, into dreams, into daydreams. That's where the rational, logical thing needs to get loosened up so that we can start to connect. It's just like tuning a radio station, but you're probably not taught, other than now that meditation is one way, is more in the culture. We're not taught to shift our perceptual state intentionally. We fall into it quite easily. You know, you can only focus at work. You can't even focus for 8 hours, even if you're at work. You need a coffee break, you need a water break, you need to chat with somebody, you need some fresh air, you need a smoke out at the back. We need to give ourselves a break. Those are perceptual shifts. What the indigenous people do is they have a whole array of they are aware of their perceptual shifts. Obviously, the oak tree is not talking to you in logic. It's talking to you in vibration. And you have to get on that wavelength. You have to, which you can naturally do, particularly anything that's talking to you, you naturally have that wavelength. For me, it's stones, it's the ocean, it's the sunrise. For some people, it's a tree, it's birds, it's their garden, it's a horse. But it's more than a good feeling. It's actually wisdom. It's actually what you need to know. It's the universe, the living universe touching you, and you're part of it.
So Carl, I do have a few questions coming in the chat.
Good.
I have one question from David. He just wants to know, is large size film expensive and hard to find?
No. No. By the way, here's hopefully you can see this. Can you see this?
Yes.
So there's an 8x10 negative. No, as a matter of fact, we're having a kind of rebirth, a kind of boutique rebirth. The papers right now are delicious, really good selection of papers. It'd be nice to have some more films, but we've got plenty of film. There is a movement underway, just like there's a movement towards waking up to the earth. We have Earth Day tomorrow, the 51st Earth Day. And it came in response, somebody finally named the outrage of what we were doing to the planet. You know, the Cayuga River in Cleveland burst into flames for the 9th time. Finally, somebody said, what are we doing? And, you know, this sentiment is moving out into the world. It's much more user-friendly now. Yeah.
So Dan is asking, do you create images as planned series, or is there something more random to your captures? For example, do you decide to go to the beach, rocks on the spur of the moment, or is it deeply planned?
Mostly spur of the moment, but over the years, you know, I have myself tuned into, is this a good day for the salt piles? Is this a good day for the rocks? Do I want to go, do I want to work in the studio? It's, you know, and I do block out times, like right at the moment for the grant. This is a body of work with the stones that I now feel mature enough to really take on in a deeper way than I was able to do back then. So I am definitely blocking out time to just be in the studio with the stones. Even if I'm not photographing, I'm communing with the stones and trying to find out, what are we supposed to be doing here?
Oh, Shaina Gates, your fellow.
Hi, Shaina.
Yeah,
We've never met.
Carl and Shaina are in the gallery along with Jocelyn Toffic right now. Shaina, she says, I was happy to hear how you were deeply connected to the Peruvian shamans and to hear you share their perspectives. She thanks you for that. Can you also talk about the abstracted circular brocade photographs in the show? Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. See, I'm much more comfortable talking about culture and all that kind of stuff than I am about talking about my art. And again, I'm very self-taught. I did a couple of workshops with Ansel, but then I locked myself in a farmhouse for a couple of years with a friend of mine, and it's black and white photography. How hard can it be? And plus, when I graduated from college, we were running away from the universities and academia. Not everybody, obviously, but I felt like, no, don't mess this up for me. This is my passion. I should be able to do this. And so I would work and do tests and then drive 12 hours to the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which had a wonderful permanent display of all of the greats up there. And I'd take out my little test prints and I'd hold them up next to the print and go, oh. And, you know, then I could start to see, oh, that's what they're doing. I look at photographs, original photographs, the ones that I love, like sacred texts. And the more you look, the more you see, the more you feel. So I love original photographs. So what can I say about those? Those are a new process. Those are something new. We'll have a conversation about it. We'll have a cup of coffee. I don't know what to say about it. Other than what I'm trying to do is bring that aliveness that I feel in the stone into an aesthetic expression, into a medium. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
So Dan's asking, he saw a medium format camera in your Peruvian snaps. Has that become a significant alternative to your large format camera?
That is a compromise to being at 15,000 feet. If I were to take my 8x10 to Peru, and I probably will eventually, it would become all about photography. And as a matter of fact, I had a very dramatic moment on my very first trip there, where I had to decide, because of some, you know, when you go on a pilgrimage, everything that happens, it happens for a reason, and you need to pay attention. And these were pilgrimages. And I realized that I was not there to photograph. I was there to learn. I can photograph back home. I was perfectly happy doing everything I'm back here. So for the first 5 or 6 years, I did relatively little photography so that I could be with the teachings that I was trying to just be, you know. And then over the years, as I absorbed that body of wisdom, then I started photographing more. And actually, this is kind of profound for me. It's only after 20 years that I realized that I have this massive archive of a time that has passed and is passing, that I have a great responsibility to, even though at the time I'm just photographing what's in front of me. You just assume that the world is the way that it is, you know, particularly when you're younger, at any time, you know. But as we all know with COVID, guess what? Things change. So I didn't go to photograph, but my photography, that was part of my point of showing Don Pedro with the photographs on his wall. My photographs, I only realized over time as I bring them back, start to become important things in their life. My pictures of Don Maximo and Don Andreas who have passed, and the other elders that I've photographed who have passed, those become like precious stones to the people there. It's a unique gift to the culture. And this whole, I mean, I could talk for hours about this whole thing of the merging of cultures. It's a very complex, yeah, rich area.
Well, Hannah actually has asked, do you ever get a rush of memory or nostalgia when you're looking at these photographs you've taken, as though you're transported back when you took it at that moment?
Totally, totally. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And like I said, it's a big archive. So as I go through them and I go, oh, God, really? Yeah.
And Dakota, he's asking, he or she, I'm sorry, he is asking, you know, when you're taking a photo, going back to nature, as you talk about going back to nature, is there a way you can capture that voice? Do you have to kind of feel it, or is it an experience thing? And then they also ask, you know, what's your process when you're blocked?
My process when I'm blocked is to fall in love. That's what I'm doing when I go out to the beach. If I'm in my head, if I'm trying to make a photograph, if I'm trying to be an artist, it can be a long day. And we all have that, you know, we all have our whatever. But then it's to slow down, open my heart. The other thing that I have learned, and you know, those of you who do yoga must know this, you have an energy body. And you have a lot to say about how that energy body interacts with the world. And that energy body grows. It's like an aura, grows when you're in your heart, when you're in awe, when you're in wonder. And that is shifting your perceptual state. So I don't feel blocked as much as I just realize, oh, I need to shift my perceptual state because I'm in my head. And we're a culture of being in your head. So it's very tough for artists. And so there are very specific practices that one can do to connect. As a matter of fact, that's what all the shamans are doing. They train like brain surgeons to connect at a very profound level. And when they need it, when someone's sick, you know, when somebody breaks a leg, when, you know, whatever. This is a way of knowing. We have privileged rationality and logic in the Western tradition. And that is a very, as one of my teachers said, that's a very short shirt relative to the wisdom, the power, and the knowledge that's available. And if you read the biographies of people who have made breakthroughs in the arts or the sciences, that's what they're connecting to. That's what, yeah. So you know, there's that wonderful quote from Einstein. Knowledge is okay. I mean, you can find the quote. Knowledge is okay. Imagination encircles the world. They are using their imagination. Use your imagination, not in the way that Western culture trivializes it as a fantasy. It is a perceptual muscle. And the more you use it, the stronger it will get, and the more the universe will respond to you. Tell the universe what you want. Pray. I mean, you could call that pray. Or as the Sufis say, there's 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the earth. So do it your way.
Carl, I have another question. Julie asks, are you writing about these experiences? And can you talk about the cultural anthropology of the work that you're doing?
Oh, cultural anthropology. That's my wife. She has a PhD and she's done 3 books on shamanism and 1 on Peru. I mean, 1 on specifically with Puma and specifically on that kind of conversation. Yeah, I can. Sounds like we should have a cup of coffee. Can you sharpen that question a little bit?
She's typing right now.
I'll have coffee.
I'll have coffee.
Our drug of choice.
So Carl, do you write about the experiences? Let's just start there, like simplify.
Yes,
Do you write about
you know, that's the other thing I was actually going to say. 3x5 notebook never leaves my hip pocket, except for when I'm writing in it.
How many do you have?
I have dozens and dozens and dozens. Write down your epiphanies. Your epiphanies are like dreams. You know, you have this dream and you go, oh, amazing, I'm gonna have a cup of coffee and write it down. By the time you finish making your cup of coffee, the dream is, you know, 50 miles away or very vague. Because those epiphanies that come out of, you know, your hard work, your concentration, or just bumping your head, they are coming in a different perceptual state. And by the time you make a cup of coffee, you're in a different perceptual state, so it's harder to access. So write them down at some point in your journal quickly, and then look at them later. I read my journals and I go, who is this guy? Damn, he's good. But I forget that stuff. So yes, I am writing. I write extensively. I'm actually in the middle of writing my first sort of big article for a magazine. Yes, I'm a massive writer and I'm a massive reader.
Dan's asking if you teach workshops.
I teach workshops in shamanism. I've never taught a photography workshop. Somehow my teachers pushed me into teaching shamanism. I was telling Sarah about this the other day, that I always wanted to be a photographer, but my teachers kept going, Carl, you should be teaching. So anyway, eventually I was invited to teach a shamanic workshop in Europe. And that almost immediately led to teaching corporate retreats in Europe. So my teaching has been about the way in which culture traps us, how it blinds us, how it numbs us, particularly our culture, and how we are inherently geniuses of perceptual states and how we can step out of them. And that's whether you're trying to grow a business, build a bridge, start a company, relate to your family, be more filled. So obviously in the corporate retreats, I get them back in touch with their creativity and their childhood and their natural love for the earth. And particularly in Europe, the Europeans are not as separated from the earth as we Americans are. You know, of course, everything I'm saying here is a big generalization that you could drive a truck through, but we've only got an hour. So yeah. I'm the last person in the world I expected to be teaching corporate retreats and my family will also concur on that. You're teaching corporate retreats. How did that work out? But anyway, it's been going on for 15 years. So no, I don't, I'm happy to talk to you about photography, but yeah.
Dan wrote another comment. He's thinking about the more creative experience, not quote photography workshop, stories, instead of like technical skills, you know?
Right. Well, I haven't taught those specifically around art, but I'm happy to have a conversation.
So I'm gonna put it out there one more time. If anybody has any more questions, feel free. We're pretty much, there's 26 of us here, but if you want to unmute and actually say something to Carl, please feel free to do that or type it in the chat. We have a few minutes left.
Was that one coming in?
Dan said he'll follow up with Carl about his last question. So I'll follow up with you.
Everything that I'm talking about, at least in my world, is something that is afoot in the world at a very broad level. It maybe is not in the headlines all the time, but you'll see articles in the New York Times about people speaking to plants. New Zealand and India have just granted personhood to various rivers and river systems. This is the way all of our ancestors related this way, that the earth is alive and responsive. It's this last 350 years, from Descartes and Galileo and Newton, and the culture that we have built out of that is a 350-year blip in a 50,000-year history of human beings being in profound relationship with the earth, and knowing how to do that in a way that is complementary both for the spirit of the earth, the spirit of the oak trees, the spirit of your plants, the spirit of your animals, and ourselves. We are not alone. This is craziness. Our culture is craziness.
So
and not only does it cost the planet, it costs us. It costs us a part of our soul.
Victoria Elbrock, who was the award winner the previous year of the grant, she said, I feel exactly as you do, only I wish I could express it so beautifully. Huge thanks to you, Carl.
I hope we meet soon.
And Benjamin says, I would agree with that. And then Shaina's back with asking, what's your next project?
My next project, I'm still deeply into the grant project of photographing the stones in the studio. I do take breaks, and this is the longest I've gone not going to Peru in the last 20 years. So I'm aching for time walking in the mountains. Because again, one of the things that I love about Peru is that it's untamed, or there are vast stretches of it, and we have such a tame culture, which is why I'm out here by the ocean. That ocean is not tame. Those rocks are, millions and millions of years old. So that sunrise, that high tide, those rocks, that's the ancient language of creation. And it resonates with me, for other people, it would be the deep woods, but this is what resonates, for me. And I just encourage people to find, So all my themes are pretty much, I have been the same themes forever.
Carl, that's a wonderful way to end this wonderful session. Thank you so much for your time and your presentation and talking about your work and your process, and sharing it with our students and our faculty and our community. Everybody, I hope you get to come and see the show. You can see beautiful palladium prints and a whole other body of work from Carl. If you are on campus, you can come to the museum when we're open Monday through Friday. We're open 10 to 4 and 10 to 6 on Thursdays. If you are off campus, you need to email me because we need to get approval for you to come on campus because of COVID. So I will promptly after this email everybody with all my contact information if you're interested, and how we can get you on campus to see this beautiful work and the exhibition. And also our BFA show is up downstairs, BA and BFA show that we celebrate every year. So you can come and see the students' work as well. I'll also give you a link. We recorded this session so that if you want to go back or you missed part of it or want to review it, I will send that out in a few days to you. And thank you so much for joining us. Again, thank you, Carl, New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, all of my colleagues at the museum, and it's definitely a show not to miss. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and this particular grant, and to the museum, and Christina DeRocher and Laura and Sarah and all the great people out there. And thank you all for showing up. I totally enjoyed myself, and I look forward to meeting some of you. Okay.
Thanks, Carl. You did a great job on Zoom. First Zoom meeting.
Cool.
Check. All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Bye, Carl.
Ciao.